I resurrected my PowerPoint for this. Hello, how are you? I hope you're good. Welcome to your most anticipated releases of the first half of 2025. I'm a little bit late to this, admittedly, but that's okay. we're not gonna start the third video begging you to not look at the calendar. At least we split it in half a year, so it was a little bit more manageable considering that I still gathered 70 books for you to note down. Again, these are your most anticipated releases. I have the series where I gather other readers' preferences and recommendations, be that for fantasy or certain genre or certain trope. I will link this down below if you want to look at the other video. I tried to include as many as I could if they made sense, if the dates were right. Some of them were releasing actually later. Not all of the books obviously made into the list, but 70 I would say is still a very significant amount, and we are set. I resurrected my PowerPoint for this. I don't think I've used it since like 2014 or 15, so it's been a hot minute. That being said, there's 70 books. I did not do a deep dive. I will not be talking about them in depth, so this is probably not the best video if you're looking for new recommendations. This is probably a video for people who are already readers and just want to know what's on the radar, especially as there are so many third books in a series this year. I don't know what's in the air, but we're having a lot of third book in a series type of situation. That also being said, I did not do any type of vetting or any type of proper review of these, so thank you so much for submitting them. I am excited to do the part 2 for this as well, especially now that I could just reuse this template. You know what, let's get into it, because 70 is still quite a few. We might be here a while. Okay, now that I am itty bitty, because we're doing the part 1, of course I'm hoping to do a part 2 and not leave you hanging. So let's get started with January. Of course, all of these books are already out, but I thought in case you missed it, I don't know, it just felt incomplete to skip January as well because the suggestions were there. On the 14th, we have the new Grady Hendrix called Witchcraft for Wayward Girls, and this is a horror staple for an author. As well on the 14th, we have Watermoon. I have heard that it is quite Ghibli-like, so if you're into that, you might want to check this out. Absolutely love the cover. That is a side note. Both of these, actually. On the 16th, we have The Baby Dragon Cafe with fantasy cozy romance and a first book in a new series. Then on the 21st, of course, the Onyx Storm that has taken the socials by, well, Storm. Onyx Storm is the third book in the Fourth Wing series. And Onyx Storm, despite it already being released, is one of the more mentioned books in this list, and Watermoon also got a fairly high amount of recommendations as well. On the 28th, if you're down for contemporary romance, we have Out of the Woods, and the 28th is the last January book, At the Bottom of the Garden, which is a standalone horror book. Moving on to February. February will have, I want to say, quite a few slides. So on the 4th, A Burning in the Bones is a young adult fantasy, which is a third book in a Waxways series. Then on the 4th also, we have a romance fantasy YA retelling. This is by the author of Fragile Enchantments, a dark fairy tale retelling, Black Woods Blue Sky, which I believe is also illustrated because the second author there is an illustrator, and a Regency young adult fantasy book also on the 4th. And you guessed it, another release on the 4th, epic fantasy horror book. Moving on to the 11th of February, another third book in a series called Talents. And this one is Reign of the Talents. As well as on the 11th, we have a fantasy poetry book, I believe, or at least it is told in verse, called Skin, and it is based on Caribbean folklore. February continued on the 11th, Emily Wilde and the Compendium of Lost Tales, a third in the Emily Wilde series, one of the more mentioned books in your anticipated list, so very popular. Another one is The First Time Caller, which is a contemporary romance. Going on to the 13th of February, we have Hungerstone, which is a fantasy horror gothic retelling. On the 13th also is a new book by the author of Wayward, which is also a fantasy magical realism mystery book. We have the sequel to The Crimson Moth on the 18th, which was quite a popular release as well, was mentioned quite a lot of times. The 18th, we have the sequel to Feybound, which is an adult fantasy. And also on the 18th, Upon a Starlit Tide, which is a dark fantasy retelling of power and betrayal More February, this is a big month. We have The Dark Mirror, which is actually the 5th book in the Bone Season series. Very anticipated, came up quite a lot of times, and I'm really hoping that people who are looking forward to it and waiting for this are not disappointed. And also lastly, on the 25th of February, we have a cozy mythology fantasy called Green Teeth. Despite the cover, it is cozy. I know the cover is unnerving maybe if you zoom in into that little face, but it is classed at least under cozy. Going into March, we have a new book by Elsie Silver. This is a third in the Rose Hill series. We also have a third book in the Legendborn series. This one was also anticipated quite a lot in the answers and came up multiple times, and it is a fantasy YA retelling. Still on the 4th, we have a gothic horror fantasy for young adults called I Am Made of Death. Also on the 4th, a sequel to Swordcatcher by Cassandra Clare. Another one on the 4th is an African literary fiction called Dream Count. I put it as adult YA there because I wasn't actually sure. It was mixed results when I looked it up. And a speculative dystopian sci-fi, which obviously rang all the bells in my mind, called The Dream Hotel, also coming out on the 4th. On the 11th of February, we have The Tombs of Dragons, which is a third book in the Cemeteries of Amalo series. Also in March, we have Go Luck Yourself by Sarah Rash. This is an author of Snow Like Ashes, which is a very, very kind of like OGYA vibes series. This was on a couple of people's radar as well. The Earl Meets His Match, which is a queer Regency romance. Then on the 18th, we have the new Hunger Games book, and do a little drum roll here. The top 1 book, the most anticipated book for you guys in this half a year. This by far got the most votes. It came up again and again and again. I'm really hoping this is good. I myself probably am quite looking forward to reading this. I never ended up reading the snake one, like the previous one. Was very excited for it, heard mixed things, and then just didn't happen. But I'm very excited for this one because this one is the Haymitch's games, so exciting. On the same day, there is a non-fiction coming out by John Green called Everything is Tuberculosis. On the 25th, we have the sequel to Fathom Folk, which is a fantasy mythology. Again, on the 25th, we have a book called Blood on Her Tongue, which is a gothic horror kind of vampy fantasy book, and a sequel to Scarlet Veil by the author of Serpent and Dove called The Shadow Bride. I feel like I threw a lot of titles your way there, but that's what we got there too. On to April. We're getting there. April Fools is going to be a popular day for new releases, but Kingdom of the Forgotten is the 4th book in a Witch Walker series from the author of Just for the Summer, another contemporary romance called Say You'll Remember Me, which did also get quite a few votes. Another one, A Drop of Corruption, which is a sequel to The Tainted Cup. Very anticipated by myself, and I feel like this in particular might have been swayed a little bit by the audience that I have, because we have read this as the Patreon book club. A lot of people really liked it, and a lot of people are very anticipated for the second one. So this one also got a lot of votes in the thing, but I don't know if that's because of the book club as well. But we're excited, so that's good. We also have the 3rd book in Powerless series coming out on the 1st of April as well. Holy Terrors. This is the author of Little Thieves, but now I can't actually remember if this is the sequel to Little Thieves or if it's a separate one. Sorry, I didn't make a good note on that one. Still on the 1st of April, we have a sequel to Vera Wong's Guide to Snooping, well, Vera Wong's series, but it's called Guide to Snooping on the Dead Man. I didn't actually know this was coming out, and I'm very happy to learn this because I really had a good time with the first one. Still on the first one, we have a third. What did I tell you? There's so many third books in the God Killer trilogy. Is it? I don't know if it's a trilogy. A God Killer series, let's say. Fatebreaker. Moving on to the 8th of April, we have a book called The Maid's Secret, which is the 3rd book in Molly the Maid series. Another one on the 8th is a sequel to Phantasma, which is, I believe, like a dark romance book. Then a horror sci-fi book that is written by the author of Ghost Station called Cold Eternity. I am very keen to try this author. I haven't yet, but I've heard great things. Another 3rd book, this time in the series of To the Book That Wouldn't Burn, I'm not actually sure that that is the series name, but the first book is The Book That Won't Burn. On the 15th, we have the sequel to The Stardust Thief called The Ashfire King. Book 4 in Rebel Blue Ranch series for Western contemporaries coming out on the 15th. And then on the 22nd, we have a queer fantasy romance, which might be illustrated. I couldn't quite understand if it was or not, so it might not be, but it could be illustrated, coming out on the 22nd. Still in April, we have another one very highly anticipated read, which is a new Emily Henry book, a contemporary romance called Great Big Beautiful Life. Got quite a few votes as well. Fourth book in Twin Crown series coming out on the 24th, which is a fantasy romance for young adults. The only middle grade that found its way onto the list is the, fourth book as well, the Nevermore series. Very happy for those who are enjoying these. And then on the 29th, we have of Envy, which is actually a fifth book in Kings of Sin series. On to May, The Devils by Joey Abercrombie has also gotten quite a few votes, an anticipated grim dark new fantasy by this author. A sequel to Fate Inked in Blood called A Curse Carved in Bone is coming out on the 13th of May, as well as this academia fantasy novel called The Incandescent by the author of Some Desperate Glory. Another one on the 13th is literary fiction called The Emperor of Gladness, which is by the author of a book called On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous, which I've seen mentioned a few times. Another one that got quite a few votes is The Night and the Moth by Rachel Gillig. This is her new series and very highly anticipated. Rachel Gillig is the author of One Dark Window. On the same day, the 20th of May, we have a contemporary romance adventure for young adults called Wandering Wild, and this is also by an author who wrote the Prison Healer series. Another one on the 20th, a good day. We have a new Frederick Beckman book. I am very excited for this. I don't actually know what it is about, but I don't need to because it's an author by author for me. So I'm very excited for this one. Couple more in May, we have The Starving Saints by the author of The Luminous Deep. So having a little bit of a horror vibe there. Love the cover as well. And then lastly, on the 27th of May, we have the contemporary romance called Along Came Amor, and this is a third book in the Primas of Power series. And on to the last one. This went much quicker than it felt to prepare it, I'm not gonna lie. We are starting by the new Taylor Jenkins Reid book, and this one also got quite a lot of shout outs in the responses. It's a contemporary historical fic by the author of Daisy Jones and the Six and Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo? Blanking. Also on the 3rd, we have a new book by Elizabeth Lim called A Forgery of Fate, and it is a Beauty and the Beast retelling. On the 10th, we have the second most anticipated book from the list by yourselves, and that is the new V.E. Schwab book called Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil. Quite a mouthful there. It's a vampy book, so that will be interesting to see. On the same day, we have a paranormal literary fiction called This Is Not a Ghost Story. A new Riley Sager? I don't know how to pronounce most of these names, which is why I try not to. But this is a very popular thriller mystery author. And there's a new book called With a Vengeance coming out on the 10th of June. And then last but not least is the only one that didn't yet have a cover. I think this one only did get one entry, but I wanted to include it because it is a Scottish author, I believe. Or the book is said as something to do with Scotland. So I felt, that it was my duty to include it here. An epic fantasy coming out on the 26th called The Shipwright and the Shroud Weaver. And that concludes actually our list. A bit of a shame I couldn't include the cover for that one, but this is why it's also good that we're not going into the second half of the year, and I really will try and get there a little bit faster. But that being said, I hope that this was informative and nice and kind of rapid fire style. Didn't keep you here too long, provided the information that you needed. Hopefully you can screenshot the pages if you want to. If there was something that was missed but you're still really looking forward to, please let me know in the comments and share with your fellow readers. Thank you so much for the submissions. I'm hoping that your anticipated reads do not disappoint you, that you have a wonderful time with them, and that they are your new favorites. One could only hope, right? All right, I'm gonna skedaddle, but thank you very much and have a lovely day ahead. Bye.